Hello, everyone. My name is Alefia, and on behalf of the Social Lens team, I welcome you to our first virtual learning lab, What is Data Without Design? In the first segment, I will take you through the interdependent world of design and data. And in the second segment, we are bringing in our expert speaker, Soumya Moni, co-director of Women in Big Data, the India chapter. So what is data without design? We live in a world of systems, processes, and data where many of the problems we face are dynamic, backed with uncertainty, multifaceted, and inherently human. Think of some of the key problems and questions being asked in your organization today, as well as other organizations, or even the business or governments. How will we navigate and capitalize on the disruption in data and technology? How will we grow and improve in response to rapid change? And how can we effectively support our beneficiaries while changing our processes? For us, design thinking offers an approach for addressing this and even bigger questions. Coming back to data, data alone is just characters, dumb, raw material. Making this data intelligent and smart and of actual use to you will mean designing the data in a way that reflects the functional, emotional, and behavioral aspects of your user. Essentially, data is useless until organizations put a context to the data. Design thinking helps NGOs do just that. So, designers help in finding a connection between people, processes, technology, and data. Data alone serves no purpose. Hence, using data and design thinking together will enable organizations in connecting people to a whole other level. So, while data has been making its way into nonprofits for the past few decades, the use of data and design thinking together is still in its very early stages of growth and adaptation. Design thinking is completely about focusing on the needs of the end users and is typically focused on innovation. Now, while some organizations know the benefits of data and design, many of them miss out on actually putting the two together. So, there is one important question left. Why use data and design together? So, let's take an example. There is an NGO who was working to provide hospital logistics in rural areas. And they found out that in one of their hospitals, the mortality rate of the babies was extremely high. The babies were born just a few hours ago. Their mortality rate was very high, and it was increasing at an alarming rate. So they looked at the data and they came to the conclusion that the numbers for mortality are looking high. So what do we need to do? We need to get more incubators for the children. So the NGO went ahead and bought a supply of incubators for the children. And they waited for a few months and then they decided to look at the data again. So even after the few months, the situation was still the same. The mortality was still on the rise. So now what? So the NGO then took a design thinking approach and moved towards the end users of the product. The product being the hospital, they looked at the nurses, they spoke to the mothers, they spoke to the doctors, and they came to the conclusion that it was the lack of adequate public transport to reach the hospital, which resulted in a longer commuting time, and it was just a whole unreliable way to get to the hospital. So, from this example, we can conclude that data intelligence becomes complete and effective when combined with design thinking and vice versa. But now, this raises the question as to how can you actually use design thinking in your work? So, to understand the working of the design thinking, we can make use of the IDEO model. The IDEO is a global design company and came up with this model, and they have been at the forefront of creating change through design for a very long time. Let me take you through the model. So the first phase in this model is observation. This phase is all about understanding the end user. So when it comes to an NGO, they should understand the behavior, the pain points of the people and the community they are trying to help, or the employees within the organization. They should be able to understand the issue for the end user of the system or the process or training that they are trying to create. Ideation. This The next phase is ideation. So this is the process of brainstorming ideas with the members of the NGOs based on the observations learned from the previous phase. Now, this phase is crucial because it helps nonprofits align their innovations and their ideas with the problems that exist within the organization. The next phase is rapid prototyping. This phase enables organizations to test their ideas and innovations on the end user, the employee. Organizations should try to keep their prototypes simple. This phase is not about creating a perfect solution or a perfect processor system. It is about ensuring that the solution that you have created perfectly suits your end user. Fine, the next phase is user feedback. This is the most critical phase of design thinking, as this is a phase where organizations get an input from their end users regarding their design. This phase will make an organization understand how they have to evolve their current design. The next phase is iteration. To get a fine-tuned solution, nonprofits have to keep implementing the changes given by their end users and course correcting. These iterations will help the organization in building a sustainable design. The final phase is implementation. After a few rounds of testing and getting validated by your end users, the nonprofits will finally be ready to implement the design. So let's get back to data. Why is this relevant to data science? The adoption of data systems today remains a major challenge for most organizations. A large part of these challenges stem from cultural areas such as people and processes, and a very small part actually relate to technology. It is a well known fact that misalignment between organizational strategy and data strategy caused several program failures, and the lack of communication between the program, between the data, and the tech create major gaps in what the users of the data actually want and what the users of the data actually get. So, one of the prime factors that contributes to the situation is solutions do not solve the problems that the users face. So the data solutions will only succeed when the designers look beyond the printed requirements and find out what has not been stated. Hello, everyone. We welcome you to our first virtual learning lab of the Good Data Collective, What is Data Without Design? And we'll be breaking down the interdependency between data, design, and people in organizations. So I am thrilled to introduce you to our expert speaker today, Soumya Moni. Soumya has 22 years of experience in technology marketing with expertise in go-to-market strategy, portfolio, and industry marketing, market research and analytics with Incture, HP, Oracle, Unisys, and Educom Solutions. She is currently serving as the co-director of Women in Big Data, the India chapter. She is also the official member of the Forbes Communication Council and the National Marketing Council, the WICCI member, and she has also received the most influential global marketing leader recognition from the World Marketing Congress, which is so we're really excited to learn from your experience and your over 22 years over some of the most prestigious companies today and disseminate the learnings to our organizations and to the ecosystem. So, Soumya, being the current director of Women in Big Data, could you unpack for us and start off at the basics? Like, what does big data mean, and how is big data relevant for organizations like us today and other organizations in the development sector?
Thanks, Alifia, for the introduction, and very happy to be part of this first Learning Lab session. What does big data mean? Big data, very simply put, is managing very large, complex data sets. Now, given the proliferation of data that we see around us, triggered by the pandemic more so, these data sets are voluminous in nature. So if you look at the, broad definition of what big data means, it really has multiple dimensions. And you may have heard of three dimensions, at least in the last few years, which would have been volume, velocity, variety, veracity. But now we are also seeing variability as well as volatility. What this really means is that the data set is so humongous and huge that, it's not possible for traditional data processing software that we all use in our day-to-day lives to actually process that volume of data, because it is streaming from all formats and from all devices that we consume today. And therefore this, to translate that data into information and insight itself has become a huge industry problem to solve. And not for profit or social impact organizations, that I would call them. Actually, I don't want to call anything as not for profit. We're all creating impact at scale socially. And that's what I would like to call women in big data also. And being a co-director of Women in Big Data, our sort of responsibility and our mission is to make sure that we have more women represented in and create tangible opportunities for women in ownership with data and data allied fields. So for social impact organizations like Women in Big Data, as well as the Data Collective, I think it's really about looking at how we can resolve some social problems. And social problems, as you know, have scale. While businesses may focus on set of customers and still controlled, whereas social problems are very large and probably even so unpredictable that, constantly we have to look at what data sets to capture and what the reliability of the data set can be for us to solve those problems. So big data is hugely relevant because regardless of what social problem you're looking to solve, whether it's to do in the education space or healthcare space, or even problems like human trafficking or gender gap analysis, all of these are very large scale problems that require data. And that data is coming from so many different places that finding an authoritative source of data and then looking at samples and creating insights and making decisions is really something which all of us collectively have to figure out. And COVID and digital technologies are just enabling us to do that. Having said that, we are still at the infancy stage of solving some of these problems at scale with data.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting, even to know about. I think it was the 5 V's of data, which I haven't come across, about being voluminous and variable and all of those. So it's very interesting. I think that's something we can adopt and look at as well when we're examining our data. So you mentioned, so for all of those in the audience, Women in Big Data is a global volunteer-driven organization with a mission to cultivate tangible opportunities for women. So Soumya, can we go a little more into what Women in Big Data is trying to do for girls and women at the grassroots level?
Yeah, so Women in Big Data is obviously a global volunteer organization. It started with a group of very inspiring women who were leading engineering sector in the technology companies and leading technology companies in the Silicon Valley. And now it's, of course, become like a movement or a community of about 20,000 members across 40 plus chapters across the globe. Women in Big Data was initiated last year on October 2nd. And what we aim to do here is, of course, unlocking the latent potential of women across the spectrum, really, while they start early in their education, to providing them with employment. And data is, of course, a field where you don't really need to be physically located, right? And given that a lot of the data resides in the cloud and we are consuming it digitally, it becomes all the more easy for us to now get some careers driven out of, and that's how a huge industry has also begun with data. So Women in Big Data India acts as a platform with very specific focus to bridge the divide between industry and academia. And we are looking to improve the gender or women representation in data and data allied fields across both the spaces. And what I mean by grassroots is we're not really tapping into tier 1 cities, but we're really looking at even rural communities and maybe tier 2 and tier 3 towns where women probably have lesser access to corporates where they're looking for this talent, and educating them and helping them get on to the mainstream is what Women in Big Data will focus on. Engineering, being an engineer or being left brain is not a prerequisite for being part of this data allied field. In fact, we would encourage women who have also not worked ever to also participate in this movement as well. We're running 5 programs in Women in Big Data India. It's called Vidya, Saraswati, Shakti, Gayatri, and Lakshmi. And all of these are targeted towards different segments of women who are either looking to start their career in data or already in, or probably educating themselves and want to start a job. We're offering internship and full-time employment opportunities for these women. Courses for women who can get started with data, as simple as analyzing data sets, or even modeling in Excel, could be logical or data modeling, budget management. And regardless of whatever discipline or whatever you may have been doing, either through your education or your experience you may have, we are sort of helping you chart a career as well as an education, and with the courses that we are planning to launch with Women in Big Data India. So the idea is to really plug this gap that I spoke about in terms of divide, but also this huge skill gap that exists today, which is predicted to be about 58% or so in India alone, and about only 11 to 12%, as per the recent survey in LinkedIn, also says that women are pursuing in data-related careers, either in academia or research, or even data fields. So we thought, this would be a great opportunity for women to come forward, and we can perhaps play that role of a catalyst to create that ecosystem for women to come forward and learn something about this new emerging field that we are all grappling with at the moment.
Swami, I think the mission of your organization is incredibly powerful and incredibly relevant for women all over India, all over the world, especially with the move to just being digital over the past year. I'm so excited to see what's even going to come forth with Women in Big Data. So moving on to what you said about women in rural areas and women in different parts of India, what are your thoughts about women not as just as receivers and users of data and just analyzing data, but as active participants with the ownership of data? And what are some of the current challenges, biases that women are facing today in India with regard to being active stakeholders of data?
So data as asset, right? If you look at, we look at people, process, and now I'm starting to look at, instead of technology or tools, I'm saying data. So data is an asset, and the asset ownership is an indicator of the power of the individual, right? Whether it's in the household or in an enterprise or an organization. So the person who holds that power gets to be the decision maker of many things. And according to, and I was reading this somewhere, that according to a recent survey that a very large tech firm did, despite the heightened awareness of women's challenges either in the workplace, in very developed economies, as well as developing economies, as well as organized sectors, we believe that, and also driven by COVID-19 and the pandemic, gender equality is still not the top priority for most companies. And I believe that that is something which needs to be addressed. And I am hoping that, some of this data that, and there are many challenges for that also, is because a lot of women are also coming out of this workforce because of the fact that there's so much pressure to manage home and work life, right? So there we see a lot of women dropping out of the workforce globally. And I also see that there are a lot of diversity and inclusion initiatives to make sure that women come back to the workforce. And Shakti is a program that we are running in Women in Big Data to really inspire women who are probably, who've left out or who've been left out, or probably who have taken a break consciously for whatever reasons. They come back to the workforce. And they come back to the workforce in positions where they can lead, where data-driven positions, where they can make decisions and where they have the power to make decisions. And it's a journey. And I believe that, while the data around us, and whereas the statistics and the survey samples are not very encouraging, but we are hoping that, with the proliferation of jobs and careers that we are seeing, which can now be done remotely without having women to travel wherever they are located, I see some light. I see some, glimmer of hope in terms of, getting women back to the workforce, especially in the data fields. Now, when I look at India specifically, I think the gaps exist for many reasons. Because most surveys do not capture, and if you look at broadly, women not just in organized sector, but more so in unorganized sector. We believe that most of the household data that is being captured today does not assess the woman's ownership of assets, and even their access to basic amenities, whether it is to do with their financial independence, or whether it's to do with what their investments are. I think that crucial data point does not exist for us today. And it is still something which we are working towards. And probably once the definitions of data collection around women are clear is when I think reporting will be more accurate for us to create some more meaningful programs. And I'm not meaning in terms of, quantity, because there are too many programs that many organizations are running, which are around diversity and gender inclusivity. But what I'm saying is that, impactful programs where women are owning the data and women are driving decisions for companies and enterprises and households with that data. That still is a journey for not just India, but globally. So that's my perspective on, what, data as an asset ownership means, and how women are playing, or women can potentially play a role in future.
So that's extremely interesting and has given me a new way to think about data as something as beyond as an asset, and as, women owning that asset. So I feel even today, and a while ago, even myself, like a lot of people, when they think of data, they find it technical, they find it overwhelming, they think of numbers, models, and then they just put it out of their reach. They think as something they cannot do. So what is something like you would like to tell organizations and people about the importance of the human element, the people, the processes, and the design in the data journey, and why is it so important to, why are these pillars so important to consider?
For me, data is a premise for good design. Okay. Now, good is very subjective, right? Because it's not objective enough. But when you look at, design thinking, for instance, as a topic, if you look at it, I think, what is design thinking? So I'll just break down what design thinking means, right? And in context of data, right? So design thinking fulfills certain objectives, which is really to better understand the social, emotional, and behavioral needs of your customers. And this I'm talking from an organization standpoint. And I'll also relate to how design thinking perhaps can be used for social innovation or with social impact projects. But broadly, the principles of design thinking are the same. You are basically understanding holistically, with the use of data, what your the understanding of social, economic, and behavioral, as I mentioned. You develop ideas and innovative approaches, or design offerings or products and services, keeping your end user or your customer, if it's an organization, or your mission partner or your beneficiary, if it's a social impact organization, and keep them as the center of the development process. So often what I have seen many product managers do, and I say this with experience after being there in marketing for so many years, is that product managers tend to associate, they're so emotionally attached with their products, they often tend to look for customers after they've built the product, but they've not really looked at the customer's journey as well as the customer's pain point, and that need has not driven the ideation for the product, but it's often the reverse, right? So design thinking basically helps you to look at the customer and look at what the customer's needs are, and uncover some deep insights by probing the customer or the end user as to what they need or what are their current pain points. And you do that with some focus interviews. And then you draft or you craft a well suited narrative which meets those needs. And this is no different in we've identified a problem in women in big data where we felt that the gender representation was low, and we felt that women were dropping out as they progressed in their careers, which is what we didn't want them to do. And only about 2% of them out of the entire workforce ever met the leadership standards that an organization would set out to do, because women would have taken breaks or would have discontinued their career journeys. And therefore, we felt that, women were heavily underrepresented in various facets of growing an organization. And when we understood this to be a problem, now we need to find out from women as to what can be a potential solution to that problem. So we put women, in the center of the development process of understanding what their pain points were, and devise those programs which are targeted towards their needs and where they are in their life cycle stage. So every problem or every data set that we used needs to be defined by an underlying problem and an inspiration around it. And design thinking only facilitates us to do that. I'll also give an example of how we use this in real life, right? Often, we tend to use, as researchers, primary surveys to collect data. And we have some pre-fed questions, right? And we felt, and this was something which we did even for internally, to define the mission, vision, and core values of an organization. And we thought, and we felt that, the responses were homogeneous, because the questions were crafted in such a manner that they were directed or they were leading questions for us to get those responses. So we decided to actually adopt a different approach because we didn't want homogeneity. And because the survey was flawed, we thought the best way to address this would be to do a design thinking workshop. And that led to such innovative ideas. And we invited employees from a cross section of the company, across functions, across levels, to talk about what the company meant to them. And that led to, defining and designing the core values for the company. Now, I thought that was an amazing experiment of using design thinking to solve a problem, which is really about what do we stand for as a company. So I think, in my view, if the human element is not there in defining a problem, I think it's a flawed and inadequate design. So that's my response really on that question.
Thank you, Soumya. That was an incredibly interesting example. And we also use design thinking a lot when very often, when you go by the book and go by the printed requirements, you're bound to miss something. And I feel one of the most key tools to overcome that and to push your creativity, your innovation, is design thinking. And that extends to almost every part of the organization. And it's quite often overlooked. And we're hoping to make a change.
Yes.
And moving on to your work with Inkture and Inchera. Inchera is the CSR part of Inkture.
Yes.
I think we want to understand, what are the current active programs in Inchera, and how do you all use data in managing, executing, and planning these programs?
So Inktura is a social impact initiative of Inkture. It's a digital solutions company, and I lead marketing for that. We run two major programs and under Inchira, which is the education pillar and the environment pillar. The underlying premise for Inchira is sustainability. So we're looking at building some sustainable programs using digital tools. Given Inchira is a digital solutions company, the parent company creates a lot of digital solutions. We're thinking of how we can use those digital solutions to serve the rural communities. And those rural communities are essentially defined and identified by Inchira's core education group, where we are looking at education partners or mission partners, as we call them, where they already have some infrastructure available for them to educate the community or the villages. And we've just started that journey because we are looking to employ the rural youth in some of the basic sort of data driven skills. It could be either programming, hardcore programming, or it could be also visual design skills, and making them employable in the industry without having to migrate them from where they are. So that's really what the education pillar focuses on. It runs two sub-programs, which is skill development. And that's one which I spoke about, which is really about developing technical and hardcore skills. And then we're also running a curriculum development program as well to build out the curriculum to serve these communities as well. Because as you can imagine, in a rural setup, there are several other skills that also need to be developed, whether it's the English speaking skills or some of the soft skills also that need to be developed, along with the hard skills that are required for training them technically. So Incture is supporting that mission with some mission partners that we've signed up with, both in the curriculum area as well as in the skill development area. And we're also promoting environment sustainability with two key programs. We're calling it urban forestation. Because we're all living in cities, we want to make sure that, especially the city that I live in, Bangalore, we're depleting lakes and deforestation that's happening because of the concrete that is being built around us. We're sort of supporting a couple of organizations who are specifically focused on urban forestation and with tree plantation drives, as well as lake conservation. Bangalore used to be a city of lakes, so we want to make sure that lake rejuvenation efforts continue with the help of Inchira. So these are the two programs that we are running. From a data standpoint, as I mentioned, we are still a little less than a year old. We're still formulating and developing these programs, but in a very controlled setup. So the data that I have is really not to work with too many partners or with too many organizations or take up too many programs. It's to be focused with only 4 programs with a set of partners whom we can deliver successes with. So it's a controlled experiment with a qualified sample of only about 4 mission partners that we are working with. And we are looking at certain goals which we believe are realistically feasible by us to achieve. So, so that way, I think we are driven by data, but we are also driven by experience. And we want to sort of build on that. And as we move forward, I'll be able to share more on what and where and how we are using data to develop these programs and execute these programs.
Thank you, Soumya. My final question to you today is, how can organizations ensure that they place women at the center of decision making and ideating when it comes to data and technology?
So I think, as I mentioned, that data asset ownership is important. And if women have that ownership of data as an asset, you automatically become the center of decision making, right? So I think now moving women aside, I believe that, there are a lot of data oriented. I mean, if I were to remove just the gender aspect and only focus on, how you can use data and technology, and women can use it or men can use it. It doesn't matter. It's not exclusive, but there are various virtual experimentation platforms like Kaggle, which really help you to, experiment with data sets. Now, these are all open data sets that are available for you to try out, how you can solve problems for some of the social issues that we face. And I believe that, they run a lot of competitions on data analysis. And I believe many organizations or not-for-profit organizations specifically, or I call them as social impact organizations, who are tackling social issues, need to participate more on these platforms. Women in big data is encouraging many of the aspirants who are looking to be part of the data field, or looking to start their career or education data, to participate in Kaggle competitions, in their hackathons, to use the data set that is available. And I think once you start experimenting and once you start working on those data sets and looking at solving some of the problems and social issues and contributing to Kaggle itself, I think there's an immense opportunity for the same women to sort of do that in the workplace, or in the enterprises, or in the households, or in the organizations that they are taking care of. So I think it's important to start with, some qualified experiments. Often you can't do that on the job that you are in because of the risk factors, but you can use some of these virtual experimentation platforms, which allow you to experiment with open data sets before you can apply it in a real life problem or scenario, for which the risk accountability is very high.
That's actually really interesting. I might try it out myself. And Soumya, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great learning from you, and we hope to see both Injera and Women in Big Data grow, and hope to have you join us again.
Thank you, Alifia. It was a pleasure being part of this initiative.